St-Pierre weighed in on Whittaker versus Chimaev, St-Pierre went as far as to say that Whittaker, with his skills, can make Chimaev look bad. And what an interesting statement. George didn't need to go that far. George trained at TriStar. Whittaker trained at TriStar. So they were teammates and friends and acquaintances. George could have picked Whittaker. Could have just tipped the hat to him and walk off. It's not George's job to be impartial anyway. Like, George isn't behind a desk. He's not an announcer. Where he's got to be honest. He's got to really be truthful. Speak from his expertise, not from his heart. He didn't have to do any of those things. He can just say, I like Whittaker in the fight. But he didn't. He went further. And then he actually broke down why. And it's very much the opposite of what we felt we learned from the first UFC in 1993 until present. Because George St-Pierre was talking about the advantage is that Whittaker understands karate and Chimaev only understands grappling. I mean, from day one, literally, from the day Royce Gracie stepped in there, which is what led George St-Pierre himself to get into jiu-jitsu. So George, who mastered all of these things, started with karate, mastered all of these things. It's a very interesting perspective. And it's a perspective of what might be the greatest to have ever done it. And more than anything, the reason I like this, it reminded me we had that fight. I forgot about that fight. And one thing you're not going to see is a lot of promotion for that match. That's just not how Whittaker's mind works. And Chimaev, who was the media darling, I don't know if the media turned on him or if Chimaev got tired of doing it and quit giving me, I don't know. All I know is I could not open a .com anywhere for a year and not see 3 Chimaev stories. And now, you're not guaranteed 3 Chimaev stories a month. I don't know why. By the way, I don't have a thought beyond that. I'm just sharing for you when George came up and brought this fight out and started talking about it. One of the things, yes, that's right. I forgot we had that. I even went and checked the dates. It's like 10 weeks away. I go, well, but it's been announced for a couple of weeks. Like, they announced this 3 months in advance. Okay, great. Don't usually have to wait that long. So, okay, great. How are we going to get there? And the most important thing about this match, it's not that it's a former champion. Chimaev's actually had that opportunity before to be in there with the former champion. There's not a lot of former champions floating around. I mean, right, you make it to that spot, you're looking for the door. Not a lot of them stick around and want to keep doing it and believe they can get that back. So it's very hard to get on the docket with a former champion. That's all that I'm saying. But Chimaev's done that before. In fact, he did it in his very last one. He did it with Kamaru Usman. The thing that Chimaev hasn't done is he has not entered the 5-round club. And there is a belief. Michael Bisping spoke on this. Michael Bisping, in fact, used the word obviously. He was speaking about Chimaev's conditioning, and Bisping said, obviously, he gets tired. And I stood back, and I was just wondering, do you guys have that opinion? Do you believe that's obvious? Do you believe there is a weakness within Chimaev? Moreover, do you believe it's his conditioning? And moreover, do you believe that it has affected the fights to the point that obviously that's something the opponent should work into his game plan to push Chimaev because he'll fade? Do you believe that? Because I have seen half of it. I have seen Chimaev get tired. What I've never understood in my life is how you look at a guy that got tired, who gave you his all, and then reduce that down to his conditioning is poor. I don't know anything about it. I got to tell you, I've never had a hard match or an easy match. Now, that's a broad stroke. I can tell you my hardest match. I can tell you my easiest match. But for the most part, I've never had that. I don't even know what it means. Now, some haven't been as difficult to win, but that's not what the word hard means. Hard is an exertion. How hard did you work? How hard did you go today? In a wrestling match standpoint, I would my absolute all. If my absolute all overwhelmed the guy, maybe I'd pin him. But if it didn't, maybe I'd beat him. Or maybe he'd do those to me. Like the match I lost wasn't any harder than the match I won. I get whatever energy I had, I used it. And I only say that because I don't believe that it's obvious that Chimaev has conditioning issues. And conditioning is never an issue if it doesn't affect the outcome, if it doesn't affect your performance. What I'm talking about is Dan Gable used to get guys, they get tired, but they wanted to get tired. They loved it. He talked them into, he loved it. Fedor Emelianenko, one of the scariest things about Fedor, he was in love, and I'm quoting, he was in love with the feeling of being exhausted. When you are exhausted, you are so vulnerable. Fatigue makes a coward out of all men. People wonder why they can't go with the United States military. There's people all over the world that can fight like hell, but the United States military has a way to then get those people food and water and a night's sleep so they can come back and do it again. That, the logistics alone, is what makes them stand out. Just that. And I bring that to you because if a guy isn't fading and a guy isn't quitting, how in the hell are we giving an assessment from a negative standpoint, from a corrective or critical standpoint about his conditioning? If a guy is giving you everything, isn't that what he's supposed to do? Why don't you look back and go, why didn't the opponent do that? He's tired, but he won. Okay, great. He's not tired, but well, what did that tell you right there? Well, then he should have got more tired, right? If Chimaev beat you, and Chimaev's tired. This guy did not beat Chimaev, but this guy isn't as tired. Don't you have your answer right there? So now all of a sudden, what you're using as a critique is actually a weapon. Now, I can't be right unless Bisping's wrong. And I don't know which one of us has it. I don't know. It's just an opinion. It's just a thought. So that's where you bring in the 5 rounds. And that's where you start to find out, hey, I think Chimaev was about to fade. Okay, great. Well, there's 10 minutes. Then he will. Or he won't. Or he's in love with the feeling of being exhausted, like Fedor, which is a very intimidating thing to hear. Or, like Dan Gable, he knows the power to being exhausted because however tired I am, he's just as tired, except I wanted us here and he is going to break. And considering Chimaev has never lost, I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt. But above everything else, 5 rounds is very important. If a guy is to step into a 5-round situation for his first time when he's in a title fight, it's a problem. I have a big problem with the 5 rounds, guys. I have a big problem that we're going to see the same thing for an afternoon. We're going to see 11 fights, but only one of them is 5 rounds. I go, okay, well, that's not the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. Nothing is the same if you change even one aspect. So the guys in the main event are doing something different than the other guys are doing. And it's important that you get there because how do you have a number 1 contender? How can you tell me this is the number 1 guy if you're going to take him from this body of work, which is 3 rounds, and you're going to put him over here to a totally different body of work, which is 5 rounds? Before you roll your eyes at me, guys, if you make a 100-yard dash 15 yards, you're very likely to have a different outcome. If you make the Super Bowl 2 quarters, you're very likely to have a different outcome. If you're to make the NBA game 7 quarters, you're very likely to have a very different outcome because you're now doing something different. And I only bring that to you that it's really important that Chimaev does get in this situation. Now, he might not reach it. We've had a lot of champions in this sport. You'd be stunned how few people are in the 5-round club. You'd be stunned. It would stun you. But you think we had 2 guys over the weekend, right? You think that we would. I mean, Jamal and Alex were scheduled for 5 rounds. They must be in. Oh, wait a minute. No, they didn't go 5 rounds. And see, that's where the difference comes. We've had champions in this sport. Champions. Meaningful. You look at the scale main events, top guys. They're not in the 5-round club. They were scheduled for 5 rounds and never got there. I'm just sharing for you how rare it is. And if one guy can do it and has passed the test, it's Robert Whittaker. But I don't concede to the idea that Chimaev can't pass that. I don't concede to that at all. But I will admit, as I disagree with Michael Bisping, just because I disagree doesn't mean I'm right. Let's go observe it. That's going to be between those two. But in the absence of Whittaker, I apologize, in the absence of Chimaev fading due to fatigue, do you still think Whittaker can make him look bad?